Jam-packed edition of the Shea Anything podcast coming your way today. Keith Hernandez joins us. Keith, how about this blizzard, man? Am I right?
Yeah, actually, I'm down in Florida here. It's cold. The wind is howling from the north down here. We are running around in sweaters. So,
all right. Yep, I'm sure it's tough. I feel for you. We're going to talk Bauer, Steven Matz, and his change of scenery. We haven't talked to Keith since the Lindor and Carrasco trade. We'll touch on that. What might be next for the Mets? What do we think they're going to do in center field? It'll all be discussed in the next half hour or so. It starts right now. All right, everybody, welcome to the Shea Anything podcast. It's Doug Williams and Keith Hernandez with you once again. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. So, Keith, everybody's in sweaters. You got wind from the north down in Florida. We got 12 inches of snow here. It was almost
get 12.
Yeah, it's right
you
around
got Manhattan
there. Right
got 12. Really? I didn't pick up the paper today.
There was they measured 13 inches somewhere in Central Park.
I wish I was there.
You do?
Oh yeah, right. Get the fire going. If it wasn't for COVID, I was always looking for flying up to my home because I got lots of firewood and just get in ahead of a storm, come in and cook in and get the fire going, and then when it leaves, fly back to Florida where it's warm.
Cozy up with a nice glass of red wine.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
It's just a hypothetical idea I'm throwing out there. I'm not saying that either of us.
You can add a little single malt scotch in there too.
Yeah, there you go. A little Macallan. So we have a lot to talk to you about. I mean, you came on Baseball Night New York after the Lindor trade with Gary, and that was really interesting getting your take on that. So let's start with that, and then we'll get to the stuff that's happened more recently and what might happen in the future. What do you think that trade means for the New York Mets, Keith?
Well, I think it means a heck of a lot. I think that ownership, Mr. Cohen, has made a very profound statement that he's a serious player on the MLB scene, and he wants to bring a winner here. We got a player that is getting into his prime. Certainly an all-star Gold Glove, an offensive player, a star, which I think is important. And we got a pretty durable veteran starting pitcher out of the deal too. So I thought it was a steal, and I just thought it was just a sign very positive sign going forward for the Mets.
So if you can use your own experience in discussing what Lindor is now going to be graded by. So he's coming from a smaller market, superstar in Cleveland, coming to New York. And what I find interesting in talking to you about it is the Mets now have this decision, Keith, which is like, we know we want to sign him to an extension because that's why we traded for him. But do we do that before he's even played a game in a Met uniform? Like, would you feel comfortable giving Francisco Lindor like $250 million before he proves that he can continue to be a superstar in this market?
Well, he's got postseason experience with Cleveland. He's got World Series experience with Cleveland. So he's been in postseason. I always thought that, it's different playing in New York. Sure, it's different. Some guys can't play in New York. I kind of think that that's kind of an easy explanation if someone doesn't cut it. Well, Ed Whitson comes to mind with the Yankees. Well, he just couldn't. He couldn't play in New York. I kind of think that's overblown. Lindor is a star player. If I'm the Mets, he's 27. I'd lock him up. That's got to be it's got to be a priority, and it also means you've got Conforto as well. So. We'll see how deep the pockets are. But to me, those are two critical pieces because Conforto means so much. He's come into his own. It's a 60-game season, but he really kind of, I thought, got back on track with his bat, and he played a good defense. He's become a leader in that clubhouse. So I think that he's critical. And you always have set pieces, your foundations that you have to build around, and I think those two guys will be two of those pieces.
Yeah, we'll talk about center field in just a second, but not signing Springer made Conforto and an extension with him a more likely possibility. That brings me to Trevor Bauer, Keith, because he's still out there. He and his agent, and I've said this on the air, are kind of treating his free agency like it's different from others, when in reality, I don't really think it is. More exciting. There's more access because he's on Twitter. He's got a YouTube channel. So after what happened with Jared Porter, I think the Mets need really two things out of this next big target that they have, whoever it would be. I think they need this player to be potentially affordable and not long-term. And I also think they need that player to be somebody they're not worried about, whose character that they can sign for. And if the Mets were to sign Trevor Bauer today, they would have somebody in the organization would have his tweets on alerts. Like every time Trevor Bauer tweets, you see it on your phone. You're like, oh, Trevor said this or that. And I'm not sure right now that's the kind of player you want or you can handle as an organization. Having said that, he makes the team better, Keith. So what should be the primary concern when you're trying to figure out whether you should sign this guy?
Well, I think there's a lot of concerns. I mean, I think that the Mets spending so far Stephen Cohen said they weren't going to spend willy-nilly, and they haven't. They're prudent. They've done a lot of little pickups to strengthen the bullpen. That's not very expensive pickups that are kind of low on the pay scale. The veterans to improve the bullpen. They're a little short with Syndergaard out on their starting rotation, so there you can make a case for Bauer. I always find that, you win 15, 18 games, that kind of, gets rid of it's like taking an aspirin for a headache, that'll get it done. Bauer's kind of a loose cannon, and I've played with loose cannons before, but we're in a world now of social media where it's far more, as far as someone just opening his mouth and saying something crazy or stupid to a reporter that gets in the print, I mean, right away it's around the world, so instantaneously. So I think I'm looking at the rotation right here in my book here. There's no guarantee on David Peterson, and I loved what I saw, but he's unproven. He reminds me a lot of Tommy John, sinker slider, got the big sweeping slider, and that's high praise. He's got good command. He really has to come to the fore and be this number 4 starter for the Mets. And then it's kind of up for grabs for that 5th spot with Matz gone now. So do you want to spend a big salary on Bauer? Obviously, you get a Cy Young quality pitcher. I think it sets up the rotation beautifully, but it's all about dollars and cents. A lot of these guys wouldn't be available. You had this COVID where the management, the other organizations lost money because there was no revenue from tickets and all the sales of their in game and the parking that were so important. And I think that's what's made available a lot of players. And I think the Mets were in a position with this new owner, Steve Cohen, to come in and swoop in on these clubs that lost money, and we were able to steal Lindor and Carrasco.
Yeah. The Bauer conversation, he is by far the best option for them you have your rotation in front of you. If you add him in, he's the best option available to them. However, Keith, he's been great for a year and a half of his career. He's been okay the rest of it. No. So as somebody like you who is, you're always quick to remind us, let's see him do it for 3 or 4 years. It's the price tag that gets me because of that. Like, I'm like, am I really going to pay this guy $36 million a year? And I'm not going to be able to act shocked when he's got a 4.5 ERA next year, because he hasn't proven it year after year after year that he can be dominant.
It's really more so in today's game where a guy has a good year than a mediocre year. It's not like when I was a kid growing up and you'd look at I was in San Francisco, you knew you'd get 20 games out of Juan Marichal. you knew you were going to get 15 to 18 games out of Gaylord Perry. You know, you knew you were going to get 12 games out of Bob Bolin. I'm showing my age here. That's not the case in today's game. You just each year is like another lottery. So you don't know what they're going to do. And you know, it's pretty much the same. When I signed my 5-year deal after my MVP year and batting title year, when I led the league in hitting, at the option year, so they signed me, and I had another year to play in St. Louis, and it just happened the good timing. They were taking a chance on me because I'd had a good year, a bad year, and then a good year, great year. So there was no guarantee going forward. Jim Cott always told me, you've got to know who you give the money to long term. This is in the beginning when they signed Gary Templeton and myself in the offseason. Then I signed for a $3.8 million, and Gary signed for a 3.3 or 4 over 5 years, which was big money back then. And Jim Cott always said, you got to know who you give the money to. And I can tell you from my having 2 5-year contracts that I played in, the third year was always the most difficult because I always wanted to live up to that contract. And so the first 2 years was like getting to that third year, and it's like, oh my God, I got 3 more years. But once you get past that third year in the middle, then the fourth and fifth are, you know, it's like August and September in a season.
Right.
So you don't know. And Bauer's a competitor. I'll know that. I see him on the mound, and he goes out there, and he doesn't quit. When he gets on the mound, he's business. So he's got the stuff. So those are all the risks that everything entails. There's nothing you can do to get around it. I don't care about his flamboyance, if you want to call it that. I don't really care. Just go out there every 5th day and win some ball games.
Yeah, that's a good point about Bauer, because he really is a competitor. And I have no doubt that if you were to give him a big contract, you know, I don't see him as a guy who's going to rest on his laurels, get lazy, and not worry about anything anymore because he's made his money. He's so competitive. He threw a ball into, you know, over the center field fence with Cleveland out of anger.
Yes.
Terry Francona did not love that, but that's neither here nor there. You, I'm sure before COVID, have had a lot of conversations with Steven Matz, and he's now headed to Toronto. I, going into this offseason, thought he might be a change of scenery might be what's best for him. Do you think that's where he ended up?
I think that Steven was his own worst enemy. He always fought himself on the mound. He give up a base hit, and he remember he had all that emotion and temper on the mound, and he was getting better with it. And I thought that was the last couple of years was his big improvement. But you know, last year was an abysmal year for him. I mean, it was just a horrible year. And I think my feeling is that they force feed these pitchers throwing the changeup. And that's the change up. And Matt's always 90% of the time altered his motion or slowed down his arm speed. He telegraphed his change up, and I'll be darned if he just didn't continue to throw it. And that's coming from, that's the pitch du jour now, is the change up, the circle change. Everybody starts throwing it in the minor leagues, you know, and that's fine to have an off-speed pitch. But I think it sets you back when you're trying to command it. I mean, you just can't throw a changeup down the middle or get it up in the strike zone. Ideally, you want to throw it down and away to a hitter where you get off the end of the bat. You get them out in front and you hit it off the end of the bat. You don't want to throw it over the middle or middle in because they'll hit a home run. And Matt's gave up a lot of home runs to right-handers over his career. So I think we've seen a lot of players that come down the pike with a lot of fanfare, all that pressure of being, okay, Steve was a Long Island kid and da-da-da-da-da. Now, you know what? When you get traded, you get over the initial hurt your first time you're traded, and you feel like you're going to an organization that at least wants you. They traded for you. And maybe it's a change of atmosphere will do him all the good in the world because he's got the ability and the stuff to win.
Yeah, I think the Mets the last couple of years almost put too much pressure on him, knowing the personality that he has. And you talked about him being his own worst enemy. You know, a couple of years ago, he was in the bullpen at the All-Star break, and you'd wondered what he had done to earn that. And then last year, Rick Porcello and Michael Wacha were really struggling, and yet he was the one going to the bullpen, even though he was too. He built up, I thought, enough credibility in the organization to deserve a little bit more respect than he ever got. And you're right that this team traded for him, and maybe that'll feel good. And what do you think it would have been like for you had you gotten drafted by your hometown team? Had you come up in the big leagues at home and had that pressure of your friends being around, your family being around? How do you think your career would have gone differently?
Well, I don't know, but I had, my dad was my coach, my mentor. It was good for me to get away from him and just go out and take a bold step and get in the world on my own, the baseball world on my own. I know that I was always, when I went to Candlestick Park and my dad was there, I always felt a little uneasy, particularly if I wasn't really feeling that good at the plate. If I came in and I was in a red hot streak, no big deal, because I knew I was going to have a great series. But I always felt it was like Big Brother was watching, but it was Big Dad that was watching, really. And it did add a little added, I don't want to say pressure. It just kind of like a shroud of a weight that was on you. So I'm glad that I didn't. I almost got traded to the Giants by the Cardinals, by the way. So after I had a bad year and bad start in '77, so I'm glad that didn't happen. So I think it'll be good for him, a new environment, and I wish him all the luck in the world because he's a good guy.
Well, I think that's good perspective, Keith, because it kind of shows the pressure that we don't see or hear about with these guys playing at home. I think a lot of people view it as a positive. And in some ways, I'm sure it's fun. And in some ways, I'm sure it's comforting. And in others, I'm sure it's the opposite. So that's interesting when we talk about Steven Matz. Back to center field. So the Mets don't sign Springer. I think there was a large portion of the Mets fan base that was upset about that, thought, look, we've got the richest owner in baseball. Why not write a check? You need a center fielder. He's the best one. Go get him. Now that we know that not signing Springer makes a Michael Conforto extension more likely, do you think it was the right move not to go there?
You got to be strong up the middle to win. The Mets were never strong up the middle. Obviously, Springer's one of those players that's up the middle. He's a center fielder. So he would really strengthen, that the defense for the Mets. Nemo on balls hit directly at him, he doesn't get good breaks on. He misreads a lot on that line drive hit right at him. And that's a tough play. He either breaks back or he breaks in. He's a little hesitant. He can cover laterally, and he doesn't have a really strong arm. So really he's best suited to be a left fielder. Now, my feeling is you look at this lineup, and particularly if there's going to be a DH, you can go get a low end defense only center fielder. And it's not going to cost you a lot of money, and you're not going to get a lot of offense out of him. But obviously, if he's a great defender, he's going to be fast. And it's someone with a DH that you can hit ninth, because now with the DH, you don't have the pitcher, obviously. Everybody likes to put that second leadoff hitter in the ninth hole, because as the game progresses. So my feeling is, I think Springer was a bridge too far financially. After with Conforto, I think they're going to sign Conforto, or at least try to. He's with Boris, and Scott likes to take his clients to free agency. But I think Michael wants to stay in New York. I think he's happy. And how are you going to turn down a $100 million deal? How do you turn that down? I mean, put me in an armored car and get me as fast as you can to that. Give me a pin right away. Let me sign it. I mean, how can you turn it down?
I mean, I agree with you.
Yes.
But Scott Boras might be saying, it's cooler than 100 million, 200 million.
I know.
And
I know.
that's when the clients these days are like,
you're
okay,
set for life with $100 million.
yeah,
Boy,
I take it.
Spend it. You can't spend it. Maybe you can find ways, but I've been thinking it over in my mind. I can't think of a way. How do you spend all that?
Yeah, you got to get creative. There's ways to do it, I'm sure. Yachts and cars, but how many yachts can you water ski behind? I guess the funny part about what you're saying, at least to me, is Jackie Bradley Jr. has always been looked at as like, okay, he's the guy you get if you don't get Springer. Red Sox, great defensive center fielder, has a little bit of power, kind of an inconsistent hitter though, Keith.
Right.
The problem is he apparently wants a lot of money. Like, he views himself differently than Mets fans. Shocker. Mets fans were like, all right, he's your fallback. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is like, I'm a pretty good player. I'm not going to sign for 1 year, $10 million. I'm going to cost $50 million. So that's where I get caught up, is because I totally agree with you. I don't think the Mets needed Springer. I think they have a nine hitter who's great. Ray Ordonez in center field. That's fine. But if Jackie Bradley Jr. costs $50 million, that might be a little too expensive for me. What do you think of that player?
Well, I don't blame Jackie. It's his free agency
right.
year.
I agree with you.
You got to try to cash in. Now, when push comes to shove, I mean, he's still not signed. And as the season gets closer and closer to spring training, he hasn't got a team. The pressure starts mounting on him, because I know he wants to play. But I can't blame him for wanting to get as much as he can. I think he's a little too expensive myself, but I don't make those decisions. It'll be made by Sandy and ultimately Steve Cohen.
Yeah. Look, I think you desperately need help. And I don't know if you don't watch the Mets every day, you watch them as close to every day as 99.9% of the population. Brandon Nimmo is not a center fielder. It's a little bit like when you're watching a game at home and you're like, Dom Smith didn't get to that ball and left. That's a bummer. Well, Dom Smith's not a left fielder. Brandon Nimmo is close to that, at least in my opinion. Like, he is a corner outfielder. He's a good enough athlete. He's a 400 on base percentage guy, so he belongs in your lineup. But to have him every day in center, I think sets back your defense. And to your point, when you started the answer about Springer, you brought up Lindor. You're improving the up the middle defense. You got McCann, right. You already signed him. You got Lindor, a Gold Glove shortstop, and I don't see how Sandy's going to leave center field up there for grabs after improving those two positions.
I don't think he will either. Now, what's going to happen too if there's no DH? That creates a problem, and you're going to put Dom out in left field, and Dom, it doesn't cover any ground. Conforto plays in a very, very big right field, and Michael covers ground, but Michael's not really, a speed burner. You really, with those two corner outfielders, particularly Dom, you really makes it more important, more critical that you have, a jackrabbit out in center field that can cover the gaps.
Yeah. The fact that we don't know yet about a DH is insane. Like, if I know that the teams and owners and players association, everyone is wrapped up in these negotiations right now. But if I were a GM and I didn't know what my lineup would look like every day, and I didn't know if I needed to be good defensively at a certain position, that gets in the way of doing your job. Like, you don't know what the Mets are going to look like. I mean, that's a huge if.
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy. So
that's the days when you had a big hitter, and he was a liability in the field. You had to live with that. That's just a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So, because Dom can hit,
right, and
so
Dom can play first too.
Would solve their problems.
Yeah. Overall, so far, you like what the Mets have done with their offseason?
Absolutely love it. Lindor, Carrasco. I'm looking here, picking up McCann. I don't know anything about him, but I've read that he's very interactive with the pitchers. He's a good defensive catcher. I think that that's a big plus. And what they've done in the bullpen, with all these veterans, it's really a veteran bullpen now. You picked up Trevor May. You've got Justin Wilson is still kind of out there, in the free agency market. I know that they who's a lefty they just picked up.
They just got Aaron Loop.
Right. So Loop is kind of a side armor, and I think he's more of a left-handed specialist. But you look at his numbers over his career, he's had a nice career. He's a quality journeyman left-hander out of that pen, and he's got experience. I still always like two lefties in the pen. So my feeling, I would love to see them get Justin Wilson, back. And I know he's a free agent, and I don't think he's gonna get that, much. I mean, $5-6 million. I don't know what he made last year, but what he's asking for. But I think with Loop and him, boy, that's two solid left-handers. I think that sets the bullpen up, and then Lugo's got to go back into the bullpen.
Yeah, they have so many guys in that bullpen right now, Keith, who, like, when you're doing a game, can grind the game to a halt. Like Familia can lose the plate, Betances can lose the plate, Edwin Diaz can lose the plate. Miguel Castro throws really hard, but he was losing the plate last year. One of those guys, though, is going to have a good year, if not more. Like all of those guys have potential. It's just they're so volatile that you don't know. So to your point about Wilson, you really can't. You can never have enough.
It's funny that you mentioned those guys too, because they need to work, and it's going to be a task for Louis to keep them all sharp. I mean, what are you going to carry? 7-8 relievers? You've got to, you can't just pitch them one day and then they don't pitch for 4 days. Particularly Familia and Betances and the other guy with Castro. I mean, those guys are erratic and need to pitch. But they're going to be your middle. They're going to be your middle guys. Mm-hmm. And I think you can maybe get 2-3 innings out of those guys, stretch them out. Lugo be your bridge. You got to let Diaz, he pitched better last year. You got to let him try to open the season with him as your closer.
I know you were having, as we finish up, some NFL fatigue mid-season, too much football for you.
Yeah.
Did you eventually get past that? And were you, into the postseason? Do you have Haji did Haji bite you? Do you have a Super Bowl pick?
I think Kansas City is the better team, but I'm not going to bet against Brady. But I think Kansas City is a superior team. I don't see how they're going to stay with him. I mean, this Mahomes is just unbelievable. He's the best quarterback I've ever seen. He's unbelievable.
He makes the position. He's changed what I think of the position. His ability to do certain things, and I think Aaron Rodgers.
Quarterbacks I grew up with in the past. I mean, he was Fran Tarkenton could scramble. Y.A. Tittle I was showing my age. Could throw a great long bomb. A Namath, quick release. He's all those into one. Mm-hmm. He's got it all going on, and he's just incredible.
Yep, he would be, if I were to pick one person to switch lives with, he'd be up there. Because I mean, he's got all the talent in the world. He's whatever he is, 25 years old. He's already signed a monstrous contract. Tom Brady has shown you can do this if you work hard at it until you're 45. He's a minority owner in the Kansas City Royals already. I mean, the sky's the limit for the rest of his career. He's
incredible. I love to watch him throw on the run.
I know.
He's little sidearms. So strong arm, incredibly accurate. He's just amazing.
Well, Keith, always good catching up with you. I hope you can brave that cold weather down in Florida, and that Haji will learn to stop biting you when you're doing a podcast.
Yeah, he's the most affectionate cat. It's just amazing. Okay. 18 years old.
Wow.
Going strong. All right,
Keith. Thank you for checking in, and thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you next week.